Namo Myo Renge Kyo. I was asked recently about a branch of Hinduism, a particular individual, a monk, or whatever. I believe it was a monk of a Vedanta branch of Buddhism. And this was from one of you, and you had said that sometimes his rhetoric, this Hindu monk, sounded rather similar to what he understood of NICHIREN's teachings and what we talk about, and asked me, what my thoughts were on this. And we're about to read something in this account of NICHIREN's life, quite myoho, if you might, if you think along those lines. The timing is quite auspicious. And we'll directly address that. I responded, and you know who you are. But just for the rest of us, in general, when Shakyamuni came on the scene almost 3,000 years ago, one of the things that made him quite unpopular, you have to understand the caste system in India. I don't think you have to, but it helps to understand that the Brahmin class, we think of Brahma as a deity, right? But there's a whole class, an elevated class of elites in India to this day that are considered the Brahmin class. They are the elite insofar as now in modern day you would say they are the university class, I guess. They have a lot of responsibilities to maintain language and spiritual counseling. They're a mixed bag of authority, yeah? And in Shakyamuni's day, what he found, and maybe I'll find a good book on the life of Shakyamuni since we're now going through the life of NICHIREN. I have several, but they're anecdotal accounts that I haven't seen a compendium, a book of scholarship specifically about Shakyamuni's, not Siddhartha, but Shakyamuni's life, yeah? Which is Siddhartha, but I mean post-Enlightenment. There's a lot of stories about Siddhartha leading him up to his practice for 12 years, looking for this universal teaching that he founded. Anyway, back to the point. The rhetoric, the very language of spiritual discourse in his day, in Shakyamuni's day, was built around ancient Vedic thoughts, and one of his laments, as I've read it, was that although there were some core concepts and ideas in the ancient Vedic traditions that were admirable, by the time of his birth, his life, Hinduism, and there were over 120 official languages, distinctly different languages in India. I mean, it's hard to imagine that you could go, for instance, from Alabama to Idaho, and you couldn't communicate because you had such disparate differences in your language, yeah? So imagine culturally, the same thing happens with these stories, these a lot of local folklore gets injected into what was a system of thought, at least. And so India in Shakyamuni's day was just, as it is today, littered with every kind of fanciful, magical, mystical story you could imagine to try to define, everybody trying to define the human experience, right? What to be afraid of, what to pay respect to, who am I, how am I here, what am I doing, why am I doing it, all answered through this system of gods, deities, balloons, whatever. It was a mess. Still is. So along comes Shakyamuni with his language breakdowns of how the mind works. And a lot of the language he used was to address those very same people. So consequently, a lot of the early years of Buddhism cater to these ideas and thoughts, but not to support them, but rather to use them as a framework to get to clarity and the truth. But an interesting thing happens when not just Buddhism, any system does that, is the very rhetoric that you now introduce to change the minds and the capacities of the people to think and consider about their actual relationship with the universe greatly appeals to all of these other schools of thought. And as those new terms and new ways of thinking get inculcated into the society, not everyone turns into an instant Buddhist, but they learn the language of Buddhism. For instance, Shakyamuni redefined karma, a core concept, yeah? But karma before Shakyamuni and karma after Shakyamuni, very, very different things. Even though their topic of discussion seems rather similar. And that's the rub. So a lot of Hinduists, different schools of Hinduism, even Jainism, which some people consider to be a school of Buddhism, it isn't, grow out of this new rhetoric, this new way of talking about being human and the powers that be. And this continues to happen long after Shakyamuni's gone. It's still happening. And the rhetoric of Buddhism has been really stolen, but it's spread because there's a lot of logic and reason and rationale to it. And outside of Buddhism, that rhetoric has been used and tailored to fit these other magical, mystical ideas. So it all starts to sound the same. But you have to look at what that rhetoric is pointing to. And once again, we're right back to what Shakyamuni always cautioned us about. Is that the meaning isn't in the words. The words are tools, ladders, steps, doorways to achieve an understanding and a meaning which there can be no questions about. The actual Lotus of Truth we're reading right now. The real aspect of all phenomena. Life, dogs, trees, cereal, whatever, humans, sentient minds, we can attain a level of understanding and knowing that transcends all of the foibles of life, samsara. But the only way to communicate that and to have any hope of gaining those insights is through language. Language, we understand, fallible, misleading. I'm constantly dealing with that in these translations. So be very mindful when something sounds similar that their meaning is quite dissimilar. So, we have been reading about Nichiren's life. and his evolution at Sado really concretizing his understanding not only of the ultimate teachings of Shakyamuni, but how to be an effective communicator and promulgator of this essential meaning, albeit with the words that not only his scholarship demands, but that those ignorant of that scholarship have to be nudged to or educated or facilitated, right? Bodhisattva, facilitator, to gain their own, each and every one of them, their own insight to this truth. And I stopped yesterday at this paragraph because, oddly enough, it's going to nail this very thing that I'm trying to elucidate. The last sentence we read, yet men are blind or squinting and do not see the whole truth in its full light. This is that problem of language, yeah? And stubbornness. People's impressions get burned in, so to speak, kind of like we used to have problems with monitors with images getting burned into them, yeah? So to get new images and new ideas to take the fore had to combat this burn-in. So the next paragraph begins, and you'll appreciate this, my friend. Confucianism, being a system of humanitarian ethics, limits its view of this relationship to the visible side of human life, right? Observational, physical life. How the ethics of how one and another we should treat one another, right? Hinduism, worshiping Brahma or Vishnu as the highest Lord, or as I pointed out, the idea of a soul as embodied in Brahma or Vishnu or what have you, goes a little beyond the actual world, yet sees in those phantom gods the ultimate being. Right? This rhetoric sounds familiar, but pay attention to what it's saying and meaning. That this ultimate being, remember, and I spent a lot of time on this, Buddha is not a person, not a being. Rather, being, the verb, is what you and I are doing every moment of life. Our momentum through time-space, yeah? And our cognitive ability to witness that moment-to-moment being is Buddha. It's a mental, perceptive state. That's why I call it Buddhaness. Try to break that habit of saying, Buddha, oh yeah, that guy from 3,000 years ago. No. Buddha isn't a person. It's a mind, a sentient mind, observational, active state. And it's in the translations. I don't blame you for being confused, because constantly, and Anisaki has done it in this book over and over again, label Buddha either Shakyamuni or Shakyamuni and a whole horde of other Buddhas, missing the meaning, the point. Shakyamuni was Shakyamuni. He was a great teacher. He was a bodhisattva who had attained the mental state of Buddhaness and taught everyone how to achieve that same state. You got to get that clear in your mind. And this is what is dancing around in these words right here. Yet sees all those phantom gods, because they're phantoms, they're not real. The ultimate being. Somehow, human mind transgresses with these deities and phantoms and mysticism that's real life. The only being is you. Let's go on. There are relative merits in these systems. Yeah, there's useful information in there. But after all, they are blind or half blind to the true foundation of human relations and, it says here, religious worship. We don't give a crap about religious worship. That's not Buddhism. But they're blind to proper Buddhist practice, which is living this moment fully aware, moment to moment to moment. Being. Buddhism opens our spiritual eyes, our sentient mind, to the being of Buddha, Buddhaness. It's right here. Our goal. Yet many Buddhists are too squint-eyed to see the real nature of Buddhahood and our proper relationship to it. So, if that doesn't seem oddly timely, given the question and the answer that I was talking about when I opened this video, Nichiren criticizes these distorted forms of Buddhism most severely. So, obviously Nichiren criticizes Confucianism, Hinduism, and all of this for its lacking, but most of his ire is directed to Buddhist schools, quote unquote, who've completely lost their way and gone the way of this mysticism and Hinduism and other influences. So to say that you get it, someone from some other practice sounds like Nichiren does not validate anything they're saying. If anything, you should be more suspicious of the path they're leading you on with their words. The meaning, the end result, the goal. Nichiren is rather singular in our modern world for that goal, that clarity of understanding Shakyamuni's teaching, which is the same difficulties Shakyamuni had, Tendai had. Every great propagator, bodhisattva of Buddhism, has had this same drama unfold. People, the general people, ignorant of that clarity of mission, are completely enraptured in the mysticism and magical tools of samsaric, entertainment? So be cautious, friends. You and I know our practice of Buddhism is about enlightenment, a very specific self-enlightenment that doesn't negotiate relationships or truths, but rather experiences them with absolute clarity. No magic, no mysticism. Nichiren criticizes these distorted forms of Buddhism most severely and shows less clemency toward them than toward other religions. Because other religions, or other practices, truly religions, they don't function with the goal of enlightenment. They all function to make people more docile, to inculcate fear of some omniscient, mystical, magical other. So they almost could be forgiven for just being foolish. That may sound arrogant, but In truth, if Nichiren spent all of his time, or you and I spend all of our time railing against all of the different schools of religion in the world, we never get to Buddhism. We'd be too preoccupied with fighting those battles. Honestly, it's not worth our time. We need to spend our time on awakening, our enlightenment. And let that, our life condition, our enlightenment, push itself, because it does, we radiate our enlightenment outward into our environment, right? Our environment reflects our life condition. They are one and the same. They are interrelated. It's not you and I against the world. It's you and I in the world, and how we conduct ourselves radiates out into that world. That's the practice of bodhisattva. We continue, especially hiniana, the early teachings, the way of those who are contented with mere knowledge of certain truths, or with solipsistic transcendence in contemplation, is further away from the true way than the secular teachings of ethics which inculcate loyalty and filial piety. Do you understand what that's saying? He's identifying in early Buddhism the tendency of Shravakas, Pratyekabuddhas, the hiniana goals of arhatship, as being very self-centered. And having, in Shakyamuni's words, thinking they have achieved what they have not actually achieved. They've certainly achieved something, but they got out of the game in the first inning and thought they'd won. They haven't fully absorbed the profound meaning of Buddhaness in the world, in the universe, in the essence of and the core of Shakyamuni's teachings. They got off the train and said, I got it. I am now imbued. No, you're not. It's like a black belt in martial arts. It's quite an accomplishment. But as a very wise master once told me, getting a black belt simply means you're now ready to learn. You have all the tools. Now let's set about your true practice, your true education, your true development. That Nichiren emphasized these virtues together with obedience to the master is noteworthy as showing his keen interest in a moral life. Again, we have a lot of rhetoric there, master, disciple, all of that. We've talked about that on this channel before. Master, disciple, seen historically as simply a great respect for a wise teacher. But as you and I have also discussed, and I've certainly talked about it, all teaching happens within ourself. Those people we call teachers are really facilitators. They're bodhisattvas. But all the learning and the teaching goes on in our minds. Shakyamuni was keenly aware of this. That's why he was so specific about not getting lost in the words, that each person should study as much as possible so that in their own minds, in your own mind, whatever your insights need to be, you will find your own individual, unique path to Buddhaness. Because it's your karmic train you're working with, not mine, not his, not hers. We all share a goal. That's the meaning of Sangha. Itai Doshin, many bodies, one in mind. But the way that we express that knowing, individual, right? This is something that the opening to the Lotus Sutra, the Sutra of Innumerable Meanings, is all about. Is Shakyamuni addressing this very fact that each and every one of us has to secure our own path to our own Gohanzan, our door of Buddhaness. Nichiren provides us with a template of the teachings that elucidate that self-enlightenment, but that mandala is not your Gohanzan. Your Gohanzan is in your sentient mind. That's another thing people lose sight of. It must be observed also that this ethical interest was not with him merely an adjunct of his Buddhist practice, but a vital criterion of the truth. That if you conduct your life, your unique life, to its highest ideals of attaining Buddhahood, then your life becomes an expression of that truth. This is how we radiate out. This is our bodhisattva life. Everything adjusts to that truth. If you're practicing with 1,000 different truths as your goals, then what truth will you achieve? A truth is singular. It is what Siddhartha was looking for and ultimately experienced in Buddhaness, this ultimate universal truth, not just for humans, but all phenomena, the universe itself. We keep getting back there. For to commit to Buddhaness and revere the truth revealed by Buddhaness, Shakyamuni, all great teachers, does not consist of devising rituals or in contemplating the Buddhist truths in visionary ways, but in working out in our own life the truths taught by putting resolve in Buddhaness as our master and father, our perception of Buddhaness. Resolve ought to be actualized in life, but is empty unless realized in the 3 cardinal virtues named above. Nichiren's conviction that his life was vitalizing the lotus of truth was another way of stating his ethical interpretation of Buddhist practice. Makes sense, right? Buddha, as he is represented as declaring himself in the chapter on eternity, the lifespan of the Tatagata. It's so hard to avoid this silly rhetoric. Hey, sweetie, you having trouble breathing? Oh, Chloe. Sorry, my little dog's at my side. Is the Tathagata from all time, space, or timelessness, and has ever been working to lead all sentient beings to maturity and Buddhahood. So this is that slippery slope of language talking about Buddha as though it's some floating reality. It's our Buddhaness is something that's inherent in all phenomena. It's an ability to observe, but only a sentient mind can experience that witnessing, that observation, right? And that witnessing ability is there whether we use it or not. How many arguments have you had in your life with people who knew how to perceive something and seem to actively work against it, just refusing to see? It's the same thing with Buddhaness, Buddhahood. It's like air, atoms. We're all made of them. But do we focus our sentient minds on the ultimate reality of all of life? Or do we just slide along the samsaric entertainment of stuff? Very easy to do. Culturally, from Neanderthal, groupthink, right? It's easy to lose yourself in the great design of entertainment, ownership, relationships, yeah? But to hold your mind to a higher, honed clarity, it takes effort. Our Buddhaness of truth is the father of all, and we are the disciples and children of that awareness. We truly are. Practice is nothing but the way to enlightenment in this timeless relationship of samsara and clarity, truth of the whole apparatus, yeah? Morality is nothing but the method of realizing the same truth in our life. In other words, what is morality? You could say to live well, to live fair, equitable, equanimous, right? A lot of words we could throw at morality. But ultimately, isn't it about how we conduct our relationships with other human beings? And so if our relationships with other human beings and ourselves is to be at its highest, its pinnacle, wouldn't it make sense that it would be driven by a singular truth? Namo Myoho Renge Kyo. So we can see in this how NICHIREN starts to really develop not only his own practice, but his own practice within the context of humanity. We have ever been a result of the same process that is Buddhaness, and we've always been offspring of that process, but up to the present, we've been blind to the presence and work, just like the prodigal son in the parable in the 4th chapter of the text, the Lotus text. We are now awake to this everlasting fundamental relationship, and thereby shall surely realize our Buddhaness, because the tatagata is constantly caring for us and watching over us, as he says. Again, this is poetry. Now this threshold realm of existence is my dominion. I now know what Buddhaness, the goal of our practice, is. And all beings therein are like my children. We've read Shakyamuni talking about act as though everyone is your one and only child. What emotions, what sensations would you call forward without even trying if you were dealing with your one and only child? How protective, how caring, how much guidance would you get, right? Yet existence is full of troubles and tribulations. It's the nature of samsara, right? I alone am the protector and emancipator. Since I have attained Buddhahood, I have constantly been preaching truths and helping innumerable beings to maturity, leading them in the way of Buddhas. Thus, innumerable eons have passed in this work. This is from the Lotus Sutra, right? But it is the attitude that NICHIREN now understands he must adopt, you must adopt, I must adopt. This same level of commitment, understanding, awareness that Shakyamuni explored and gave us a method to achieve in the Lotus Sutra. Nichiren, this is his big aha moment. Yeah? The duty, he understood it intellectually, but on Sado Island, he imbued his very life with it. He saw his life in context of life, which is what you and I are doing. No small task, but laudable and courageous, yeah? The duties of the true Buddhist, then, consist in the fully knowing the vast scheme of Buddhist emancipation working upon us, in being convinced in our own indebtedness to this process, Buddhaness, and in requiting it by practicing the true morality, none other than attaining our own Buddhaness, yeah? Morality in human relations means, according to this point of view, a life of gratitude shown in fidelity to Buddhaness. Obedience toward one's master in the aspect that we are of life itself. We are an instantiation of this potential for life itself. We must be reverent about this life. It is incredibly precious. And filial piety toward one's parents. All other moral relations flow out of these fundamental ones. Now, as you know, family structure was very important in medieval Japan. It's been important to all of us for eons. But Nichiren pays special respect to this because we live in the age when we can't wait to get away from our parents. We rebel against them. And as we instantiate our own idea of self and ego, we remove ourselves more and more from our lineage. The things, the avenues with which we came to be in this life, and instantiate our karmic reality. Certainly we owe a debt to those who facilitated that. So never forget one's parents in that act of self-instantiation. It's a different kind of a filial relationship with parent. You don't have to like them, but you have to agree that your very existence as a samsaric being with a sentient mind to experience Buddhism, Buddhahood, owes a great debt of gratitude to them. Yeah? But this passive aspect of morality implies the active duty of showing gratitude by perpetuating the will of the benefactor. The ruled fulfills his duty by cooperating with the ruler in the maintenance of order and government, the disciple by propagating the truth taught by the master, and the child by perpetuating the life given by his parents. That doesn't mean you echo your parents. That doesn't mean you have to do as your father did or your mother did. But it does mean that the life you engage in this samsaric realm of the universe owes its sentient observation and witnessing of the process by virtue of the opportunity to do so. And in that opportunity, we owe a debt of gratitude to our parents, their parents, right? And you know, in medieval Japan, to this day, and in many countries, the idea of lineage, right? Whether it's paternal or maternal, both are valid. That our instantiation in this body and form in the apparatus owes some debt of gratitude to that which provided it. ultimately, the way we show that gratitude is by realizing that the state of life, the potential of life, the universe, the energy, the engine of life is equally, equanimously shared by ourselves as our parents, their parents, our siblings, so on and so forth. We are all of that same potential. And samsarically, our parents were the ultimate vehicle for our instantiation to realize that ultimate truth. So their life, their karmic trains, are inculcated into ours. And so we have a very profound relationship with them. This is the filial responsibility, yeah? A little further, and then we'll pause for the next video. Similarly, with moral duties viewed from the standpoint of this practice, the true resolve, confidence, consists in propagating the truth and in ourselves living the life of truth as revealed by our Buddhaness. This is what is inculcated in the Lotus text and is the real import of the vows taken by the bodhisattvas, the faithful disciples of Buddhaness. Yeah? All right. The question for NICHIREN was therefore, is there anyone in the present age of degeneration who practices the true essence of this Buddhist practice? And in order to answer this question, NICHIREN proceeds anew to re-examine the stanzas of the chapter on perseverance. That's what we'll take up in the next video. I hope this is helping put a context to our practice of Nichiren's doctrine, certainly, but Nichiren's doctrine as it pertains to Shakyamuni's entire life endeavor and the culminating teachings that is the Lotus. Yeah. Namo Myoho Renge Kyo. Thank you for listening. Thank you for your practice. Thank you for your support of this compendium of information to help keep us strenuously practicing. Yeah. Like, subscribe, very important. It's part of our bodhisattva work to make sure this information reaches as many people as possible, growing our Sangha. Don't forget all of the other links, lots of free information available to help you not only with your own practice, but give you some morsels to work with when others ask you. Your life, as it grows in intensity of Buddhaness, will attract others. It's just going to happen. And you may not feel prepared to help others who are completely ignorant or maybe have touched Buddhism in other ways come to you with many questions. You can share videos that you particularly are useful to your practice with them. You can share information from threefoldlotus.com, right? You can read it for yourself and have topics and ways of discussion amongst yourself or with new people who are wanting to know more. That's what this is. It's a resource. Please use it not only to your greatest advantage, but also to your greatest advantage of bodhisattva work. And I have nothing but admiration and gratitude for that. Namo Myoho Renge Kyo. Take care of your health. Right? Be kind to yourself. And I'll see you in the next one. For sure. All right. Take care. Bye for now. Myo.